Good afternoon. I'm Louis Rickey, Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to the final event of this year's Indiana Arts Homecoming, a conversation with Sarah Urist Green and John Green, emceed by conference co-chair Jingo M. De La Rosa. This keynote conversation caps off a big week for the arts in Indiana, which started with the Governor's Arts Awards last Sunday. The Governor's Arts Awards recognize notable contributions to the arts in Indiana and supports the Arts Trust, which supports arts projects around the state. You can also support the Arts Trust by purchasing an Arts Trust license plate. And if you missed the live stream of the Governor's Arts Awards, you could still catch it. Now I'd like to welcome Jingo M. De La Rosa to get our closing keynote conversation underway. Jingo.
Thanks so much, Louis. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. It was such a joy to be able to hear from and connect with people from all over Indiana at this year's Indiana Arts Homecoming. I'm always in awe of the creativity we have in Indiana, and these last couple of days were just no exception. But as you all know, we're not done yet. I am thrilled to welcome our esteemed guests this afternoon who really don't need no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. But before I do, just one note for our viewers. If you have any questions for our guests, please use the chat function on YouTube and we'll pick some questions towards the end of the interview. Unfortunately, we won't be able to use all those questions, but you'll never know, right? So put those questions on the chat function. Now, for our introduction, Sarah Urist Green is a curator and art educator seeking to demystify the worlds of art, artists, and museums for wide audiences. Green is the creator of The Art Assignment, an educational web series developed in partnership with PBS and Complexly, which has grown to become one of the most widely viewed and respected art education projects online. She is also the consulting producer of Ars Poetica, a web series brought to you by the Poetry Foundation that captures the experience of holding a poem in your hands and listening as it's read aloud. John Green is the New York Times bestselling author of Looking for Alaska, An Abundance of Catherines, Paper Towns, The Fault in Our Stars, Turtles All the Way Down, and the essay collection, The Anthropocene Reviewed. He's one half of the Blog Brothers on YouTube and co-creator of the educational series Crash Course. John is also a 2020 Governor's Arts Award recipient. Hello, John and Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Hi.
It's so nice to be with you, Jingo. Thanks for having us.
So good to be here with you and everyone.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, John, first of all, I rehearsed all morning to say the Anthropocene. Somehow, I still butchered it. So
very difficult.
My apologies.
I probably should have called the book something that was a little easier to spell or pronounce in retrospect.
Well, again, thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to kick things off with a question. I think it's a classic question for any creative individual. I'm sure it's not the first time that anybody's asked you this, but what inspired you, or I guess motivated you to pursue whatever you guys are doing right now?
You want to go first? You want me to go first?
You go first.
Okay.
Yeah, Sarah. Good.
Yeah, for me, artists, other artists have always inspired me greatly. From a young age, I loved making art, but it was really meeting real artists and seeing how they approach the world. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and took a class from the self-taught artist Lonnie Holly when I was very young. And I'd really never met anyone like him before. And he kind of blew my little suburban Birmingham, Alabama mind. And that's sort of been a through line for me throughout my school and my career, is really just to focus on other people's work and trying to understand it. And, that's how I made the transition from making art to writing about art, to learning about art history, to try to share that art with others through curating and through video series. but just to sort of come at different art and artists with an open mind, and the desire to learn new things and to be able to sort of be a middle person between art and artists and other people. So they're really who inspire me.
Yeah, I think both Sarah and I see making art as part of a huge web of collaboration. When you're writing, like when I'm writing a book, I'm alone. I'm in my basement. Usually I'm by myself, but I am also collaborating. I'm collaborating with my editor in sort of like an obvious and literal way, but I'm also collaborating with everybody who I've ever come in contact with in every book I've ever read. And that for me is a big part of the joy of writing, is trying to process all of these different inputs into something that can make sense as an output. So when I think about inspiration, I go back to the very beginning of Sarah and I's relationship. Like, just to give you one example, on our first date, I was saying, because we knew each other in high school, but we weren't friends or anything. And then we reconnected many years later. And the first time we went out to lunch, I don't know that it was a date. We were out to lunch, and we were.
It wasn't a date because we were with your then girlfriend.
No. The second time, the next time. You know what? There's no scandal there.
We don't need to go into
that's a completely different story.
Yeah.
But we were out to lunch, and we were. I was talking about how in high school neither of us would have ever imagined ending up in Chicago, and but how like badly I wanted to get out of Alabama, and Sarah said, I never thought of it that way because I was always very careful not to romanticize the way I imagined the future, because imagining the future is its own kind of nostalgia. And I was like, that's a really good line. And
then you took it and used it. Looking for Alaska.
I asked if I could use it. I did, but I did use it, and for me, like that's part of being an artist, is always paying attention.
Right.
You don't cross the line to stealing, obviously, but you do try to pay attention. And like one of the joys of making art for me is that it's a call to pay attention. It's a call to be attentive, and so that I think in the end, it's the act of paying attention to other people and to conversations and to the natural world that inspires me.
Yeah. I think what an aspect that you brought up is collaboration really inspires me. Like, I get tired of being inside my own head. I know what I think. It's really seeing how different people, including artists and non-artists, although we are all artists.
Everybody's an artist, really. Yeah, it's true.
But I love seeing how different people approach the same problem. I really enjoyed that in my traditional curating work at the IMA, where we'd work with just different artists to do installations in the entrance pavilion, and everybody sort of came at that one space and came up with vastly different solutions for how to enliven it. And for me, I need those sort of constant inputs. And John and I collaborate often, and I collaborate with other artists too, but that has always fed me and continues to feed me.
Cool. No, I love that you guys mentioned collaboration, because I was actually curious what collaboration looks like between the two of you as husband and wife, but also two creative individuals who have different endeavors. So what does that look like for the both of you?
Well, it's changed a lot over the course of our relationship. Like in the beginning, we would both read each other's work. So
yeah, we've always read everything that the other wrote. And I mean, and I've always felt like Sarah's opinions are more valuable to me than anyone else's, that like what Sarah has to say matters to me the most. And also, like, I can really deeply trust her. I can really deeply trust her to be, her taste is right up my alley.
I should hope.
Yeah, right. I would hope so. But then over time, like, I think the collaboration has become a lot deeper as we've expanded what we understand art to mean, and we've expanded what we, instead of drawing this bright line between your creative production and your life, between your art and your other work, or your art and the rest of your life. Like, we've tried to blur more of those lines as we've gone on in our lives, and tried to approach family life artistically while also trying to approach art from the perspective of collaborating together more deeply.
Yeah, I think we started out really, our collaboration was really in editing each other's work. I mean, the first time John shared with me a manuscript was when we were dating, and he shared looking at the script for his first novel, Looking for Alaska. And I was really nervous because I was like, oh no, if I don't like this, this is not good.
It's a deal breaker.
It's a deal breaker. You know, if you're married to an artist of any sort, if you don't like their work, like that's
a problem.
It's I wasn't going to be able to lie for the long haul. So, and I at the time was working at an art gallery in Chicago when we met. And luckily I read it and I loved it. And I gave feedback, and I said, this works, you got to get rid of this, that kind of thing. And to me, the approach has always been kind honesty. But yeah, as it's gone on, there's been sort of bleed, I think, from my more visual art and art history world into yours, and from your writing world into mine. So yeah, I mean, we like to make art, like visual art together. When I met John, he didn't make any visual art, and now he makes these great obsessive circle drawings.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that they're great, but I do make them.
I like them.
Thanks.
We've made some collaborative watercolors together.
Yeah. And we've written collaboratively together too. And yeah, just having that collaboration deepen over the last 15 years has been a great source of joy, but also a really a source of great creative encouragement and inspiration.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I've always been curious what the dynamic was. For creative people who are within a close relationship like yours as husband and wife.
And I think it's obviously different for every partnership. And I think there's lots of other good ways to do it. But I think partly because, when I met Sarah, I knew nothing about contemporary art. I was one of those typical people who thought that, contemporary art was very sort of stuffy and out of touch and not particularly relevant to contemporary experience. And through being able to learn from her and with her and visiting museums and galleries with her, my relationship with art changed so much that by the time, my most recent book came out, I was writing about works of art that I loved. And even in Turtles All the Way Down, I write about works of art that I love. So, and I think in turn, Sarah's become more interested. Sarah has become a brilliant essayist, as you see in the art assignment videos. And so yeah, we've tried to grow together. Yeah.
And John, I was still working at the IMA as a curator when John started making YouTube videos. And I just sort of watched from my museum perch as he made videos and started to make more educational videos. And it was seeing the possibility of the online communities he was working with, and seeing this online community that was so engaged and wanting to truly learn and think about things in a group setting, that I was intrigued. And I asked myself, what if I could talk about art in this context, and how would it work? So, it really has gone back and forth between our careers and lives.
Wow. This is kind of related because you get feedback constantly from one another. So I teach on a university level, and I also went to art school, and I feel like critique in a university setting is that's just as important as the lectures or the projects that the students do. But after those 4 years, the feedback is gone. So how would you suggest, how do, because I know there are artists that are probably tuning in today who don't get that kind of feedback. Right. How do you think they should go about pursuing that kind of feedback out in the real world, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that we're all, or so many of us are so engaged in social media and, you know, and sharing things and Instagram and Facebook and there are so many places online that are great to share works, but the response is often very shallow. Thumbs up, like it, love it, you know, mind blown, amazing, you know, like, which is great for encouragement. And I think sometimes it can be nice to just share things without the expectation of like a harsh critique. But you know, keeping those relationships going, I think, is extremely challenging and something that you really have to work hard at. And I'm not sure I've done that very well, but you know, I think you have to keep cultivating those relationships of people that you trust and admire and want their opinions. I have a lot of artist friends, and I love the ones who say, hey, come by my studio. Hey, you know, I'm working on something, would love your input. And it's good for me as like an art viewer and experiencer as well, because it keeps my senses sharp. It's a totally different thing to do a studio visit and to talk about other people's art than it is to sort of flex other kind of critical muscles. So, you know, I think you can create a group that gets together, whether it's online or in person. You know, it doesn't have to be people necessarily in your hometown. And, you know, I think there's not so much in Indiana, and maybe I'm wrong, but
there's more though. I mean, you can take classes, you can.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like taking classes and joining groups it's like work. And I know like most of us are introverted and it's not the most like joyful work to like sign up for the Society of Children's Book Writers, but you know, the connections that you can make through those relationships can be very, very valuable. And in classes, if you sign up for classes, like you're learning alongside of peers, but it's also a way to like access mentors and mentoring, which I just think is so important. Like, I think that having, you know, having somebody who can, you know, guide you and encourage you and also challenge you is really valuable. And so that's where I got a lot of the value when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 100% agree. I mean, you got to have those relationships. Like I totally agree that those relationships are so important, because you have to have that kind of degree of trust in order to get good feedback.
Right. Jingo, I'm curious, how do you keep that going?
I do have friends who are artists. So I like email them, and I'm fortunate to be in an artist community. So my studio is at the Harrison Center. So I have close friends that are artists that are nearby that I can actually bounce ideas off of, or they could like look at my work. And yeah, it does take an incredible amount of trust for me to ask someone to critique my work. Because the dynamic's totally different after school, for sure. Because in school you're required to go through critique, whereas in school we're like, hey, can you look at this? I'm not so sure. What do you think? Like,
and it's such an incredible act of vulnerability.
Totally.
You know, I mean, you never feel more exposed. Like, I remember being in 9th or 10th grade and reading stories to other kids in my creative writing class. And before I would read them, I would always like preface it with like 16 things like, this is very rough. This isn't finished. I already know it's not good. I already know it has this problem. And now I'm 34 years old and I still do that. Like, when I email something to Sarah or my editor, there's still like this long preface where I'm like, this is very rough. Like, please be kind.
And also I laugh every time John starts a new writing project. He says, I think I'm going to publish this one anonymously.
Yeah.
And I'm like, true. You're never going to publish it anonymously.
This one I might, you'll never know.
But I think it's fine. I'm amused, but I think it's fine, because I think you have to create the right conditions for making your work, right? Yeah. So like, if you need to tell yourself that I'm just writing a draft, this is just for me, I'm just going to give this a try, no one's going to see it, no one has to see it.
Yeah.
You know, you have to do that to get going.
I refer to my novels when I'm writing them as stories, because for me, it's a way of it's a way of like, making it smaller so that it doesn't feel like it has to hold the whole weight of a book until it's ready to hold that weight.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to move on to a different question now. But let's move on to like the content of what you guys do. Like, for instance, Sarah, like for the art assignment, you talk about contemporary art. And for a lot of people, that's intimidating. It's hard to reach. Like what John said, maybe it's a little stuffy for those of us who haven't really had a lot of exposure with contemporary art. So how do you take complex ideas such as contemporary art? And this question is for the both of you, obviously. But how do you take complex ideas and share them in a way that is digestible for mass consumption or for just a simple way for people to understand?
Well, I think with art in particular, it starts from acknowledging the parts of the field that are stuffy and hard to understand. Like I don't think I've ever tried to pretend otherwise, because there's a whole aspect to the art world that is the sale of luxury goods. Okay, there's auctions, there are blue chip galleries that are selling multi-million-dollar artworks, and they are trying to cultivate the air of sort of like intrigue and mystery and value, and they don't want it to be for everyone. Right. So I think it's kind of important to say like, okay, there, when you walk into a commercial gallery in New York or wherever, whatever big city you're in, it's important to remember that they're not trying to make a great experience for everyone. They're trying to make you think that this is valuable. So that's sort of the first step, is to don't blow smoke, to acknowledge where the shortcomings are. And then I think, I've just sort of tried constantly different angles. And I tried to write my scripts for the art assignment as if I'm talking to John or a friend, or like, how would I really describe this artwork, or how would I really tell the story? It's almost like sometimes I think about, the series Drunk History.
Yeah.
I'm of course not writing or hosting the show drunk, but I am thinking like, okay, we're just trying to get a story across here. Yeah. Like, let's not, and I went to grad school for art history, and I learned a lot of special words. And the whole time I was in grad school, I thought to myself, like, okay, it's important to know this, but don't use it. These words should not be used because it doesn't help to communicate your message. Right. It may, if you're writing for academics only, I think it's fine. Like if that's your goal, to write for an academic audience and have 5 or 6 people read it and understand it, fine. But if you actually want other people to read it and understand it, then you need to really work hard to tell it straight. So, right. And I don't always succeed. And I keep trying. I mean, with the art assignment, we published videos every other week. So I obviously wasn't getting it right. I felt the freedom to experiment, to try it one way, to try to say it a different way. So that's kind of how I've gone about trying to make complex ideas accessible. What about you?
Well, something I really value in Sarah's work is the way that she acknowledges the particularity of perspective. Like, she doesn't pretend to be some kind of objective, godlike figure pronouncing this work of art great and this work of art minor or whatever, and I think that's really important. There are no objective outside observers who are able to like judge this or that. We are all participants.
Some people would disagree with that.
I think those people are wrong. And like, that's like one of my fundamental, as you know, that's one of my fundamental beliefs, that there is no like, right. There is no God of curation who can declare
say that this is a great work of art.
I mean, you can say it's a great work of art, and it is a great work of art, but within that, you have to acknowledge the particularity of your perspective and your experience.
Yeah.
And so that's something I've always valued about Sarah's work that I think has really shaped mine. When I was very early on in writing this book of essays, I sent a couple of them to Sarah, and she was like, you're kind of pronouncing all of these perspectives as if they're facts. But, in this historical moment, there are no outside observers, there are only participants. And that really reshaped the way that I understood that project and her work in general.
But thank you for saying that. But with your work in, say, Crash Course, where you're talking about history, like something that John's very, very good at, and what I tried to channel with the art assignment was, through Crash Course, John and his brother Hank have really worked to make history, chemistry, a lot of different subjects accessible without losing the nuance.
Right.
And there's not a formula for it.
No, but I do think there are strategies.
Such as?
So I think one strategy is acknowledging your particular perspective. I think that's important. Another strategy is leaning on narrative. And then a third strategy is, I think, trying to present the complexity of the problem in a way that will resonate with viewers. So for instance, if I'm thinking about how am I going to talk about the work of Agnes Martin? Well, here's an artist who paints lines, right? Like mostly she's painted bands of color, usually pretty indistinct color. And it's the kind of work that's real easy to walk past when you're in a gallery or a museum and be like, oh my God, I could do that.
Yeah, right.
But if you spend time with Agnes Martin's paintings, they are, at least to me, profoundly, intensely, deeply moving. And so when I was thinking about, well, how am I going to write about Agnes Martin for an audience of people who don't know a lot about art, I was thinking, well, when Martin herself talked about what she was trying to paint, she was trying to paint innocence. She was trying to paint the joy that you sometimes feel when you wake up that you don't feel for any reason, that has no accounting in this world. And how are you going to paint innocence? Are you going to paint it as a lamb? Because that does something, right? Like a lamb is a symbol of innocence, but if you over metaphorize that figurative painting of a lamb, at some point you start to think that lambs are innocence and vice versa, when in fact innocence is a lot more complicated and so are lambs. And so you think, well, I can't quite do that. And then you start to think well, are there abstract ways? Are there non-figurative ways that I could try to capture how innocence feels in a visual medium? And that is a really interesting, difficult problem that I think people get excited about. And they're like, well, I don't know how I would do that. And then they look at that Agnes Martin painting and they think, that does kind of look like innocence, which is very weird.
Well, and I think sort of practically in both the art assignment and in John's various YouTube projects, we both often say to each other as we're researching a video topic, what is the right amount of research to do? If you do a ton of reading for weeks and months, and then you're sort of overwhelmed with you're in the weeds of this information, but you have to do some research because, you need to share something. Yeah,
you have to know more. You have to know more than the video knows,
right?
Or more than the essay knows. But
then you have to select the things that are going to capture people's imagination, make them want to know more. Like in our work, and let's be honest, in everyone's work, you're not going to be able to share everything.
Right.
So you want to encourage them to go down their own paths of research and study. So what are the things that, what you shared about Agnes Martin is totally intriguing. And if I didn't know Agnes Martin's work, I'd be like, I'm going to go look this up. This is amazing. I want to see what innocence looks like. So that's really, I think, how we've both sort of approached that side of our work, to find those nuggets that are going to introduce a complex idea and insert some nuance without bogging you down with too much of the info. And it's hard. It's a hard balance.
Yeah. But I think the magic is you approach it honestly, with honesty.
Yeah, and also I think trying to reflect your own path of inquiry, trying to reflect the path of inquiry that led to you getting excited about this. I think is something that resonates with students because, they've all had that experience of going down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. And So if you can get them to feel like, hey,
Right.
that Wikipedia rabbit hole you went down, there are other ones that are even wilder,
Right.
like even cooler.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. So you both are in the video space, like you, Sarah, with the art assignment, and John, you and Hank with the Vlog Brothers. I would argue that you guys were like you were right in the beginning when video was becoming hot. Like how long has Vlog Brothers been around, John?
It's early 2007, so really since the beginning.
2007.
And what
So
year did YouTube start? 2000.
Late 2005.
Right.
Yeah. So like even before that trajectory, that upward trajectory of video. So you're like right in the beginning. So I guess my question is, like, in this age of like videos everywhere right now, like it's oversaturated with like the internet's oversaturated with video content that's serving the our ever shrinking attention spans. So what is your advice for people who are aspiring to do the same thing? Like, oh, I want to do video because that's the hot thing right now. And I want to, and are there any tips and tricks, I guess, that you can offer for someone who wants to pursue that right now? And maybe even if they have a shoestring budget, like how do they approach that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great benefits of YouTube is that the barriers to entry and TikTok too have been lowered so much that you can have a shoestring budget. I mean, Hank and I spent $229 on our YouTube setup, and it lasted us from 2007 to 2010.
Wow.
And I think I don't spend that much more now. There's a lot of hot, super high quality video on YouTube, and I think production values matter a lot more than they used to, but they still don't matter that much. It's very hard, and I don't know how to get popular on YouTube in 2021. I only know how to do it in 2007. So I feel like I should say that at the outset. Mr. Beast might have some great ideas for how to pop off in this world. But
even Mr. Beast is responding to a moment,
Yes.
So, I mean, what I learned over the course of making the art assignment over 6.5 years is that what worked in 2013 when I started the series didn't necessarily work in 2015.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to have PBS as a partner and great producers there because they really encouraged me and enabled me to experiment and to like try vastly different formats, to just like throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Because, it's very frustrating to work within YouTube or TikTok or any other platform because you're sort of a captive to that, whatever algorithm it is. So I was forever frustrated. And I know you come up against this too, that I'd pour so much of my heart and soul and time into a video that I thought was amazing and it didn't take off. Okay.
Right.
And then I'd just last minute up to the deadline, write something down, make this video that didn't take very long, and it'll just soar.
Yeah, and you never know.
So it's
that's true.
And when I also think for people who are starting out, like you have to do what makes your friends laugh. You have to, or like what your friends are going to enjoy.
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to like imagine this sort of nebulous audience and what success looks like, and there's another way to think about it of like making stuff that people like, and if they like it, like to just sort of try things and not be so precious about it.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's always changing.
For the first year that Hank and I made YouTube videos, we made 200 videos and none of them got more than 400 views. Wow. We made video after video after video, but I felt like they were very successful because they didn't need more than 400 views because the people who were watching them were really interesting and deeply engaged and really cared about it. And so that was a big moment of insight for me that like scale matters. And especially now, we are told by the structures of society to worship the number of followers we have, to worship these easily quantifiable metrics that pass for impact, but they aren't good measures of impact. The example of this that I always use is that, like, I think something like 21.8 million people watched NCIS this week, and I'm sure it's a good television program, and the people who watch it, I'm sure they get a lot out of it. But like, if you ask those 21.8 million people, like, what are the three most important things about you? None of them are going to say, like, I'm an NCIS fan, and
maybe one or two.
But
no
like,
offense to NCIS.
No, like I said, I'm sure it's a good show. I'm not taking anything.
I don't watch it.
Yes, I just think, like, but we are so bad at measuring depth of impact, of quality of impact. If one person sees a painting that they remember for the rest of their life, that's a different level of impact entirely. And so I think part of being successful on the internet, I think, is defining your parameters of success a little more carefully than like Twitter and YouTube and Facebook would have you define them.
Right. Because it takes, if you think about it in terms of community building, like if what you're really trying to get out of your online engagement is fulfillment and success, for me, it's about the quality of the engagement. Mm-hmm. And communities don't happen overnight. Like, communities don't happen all at once. Like, even if you make a thing and it immediately gets popular, you can't sustain that unless you have a practice, unless you have a community, unless you've been making your TikTok videos for a year and have this amazing back catalog that everybody's going to look at. And, or I just think that, like, John and Hank did an amazing job of loving a small audience and having a real true community within a relatively small audience. And then when it grew, the people who were part of it at the beginning felt proud and invested, and they felt like it was their success too. So I think you have to be patient and think about it like community building.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say about it is just that, like, I remember when Hank and I were going to start making a YouTube channel in December of 2006, we were like, we're probably too late. Like, the platform's so mature. There are so many YouTube channels now. They're really good. People are really funny. Wow. They're getting good at editing. And so we were like, we're probably too late, but let's give it a try. When we started making a podcast in 2015, we were like, we're probably too late, but let's give it a try. So, you think that you're at this moment of absolute saturation, but I think there's a tremendous amount of room for growth still. Yeah.
And one more thing about sort of practical tips for somebody working on a small budget. I think, we all, or most of us, have like a really sophisticated piece of technology that we carry around with us all the time. And I know a lot of people who I've talked to who are thinking about making videos get sort of bogged down in the technology and say, like, oh, well, I need a nice camera, or I need a really good microphone, or I need this setup. I have always encouraged people to just go ahead, pretend like it's for no one, make the thing, make the video using whatever you have, like stack your books up. We all know how to shoot like this these days. So I think I would say to try it with what you have, and then innovate from there.
Wow. Super great advice, man. I wish my students were watching this. I hope they are. Yeah.
I think it's going to be posted later, right?
Yeah. Yes, it will. It will. No, thank you for that. Really, really great advice for this age of technology. Also, just out of curiosity, is there anything that you guys are like consuming right now, art-wise? Any artistic obsessions that you're consuming lately?
We've been reading a lot of mystery novels and watching a lot of mystery.
Yeah, watching a lot of like noir, 1930s and 40s noir, just to kind of get the vibe of that and to see what it was about the depression and the sense of alienation and isolation that came in that period of history that led to this sort of, the black and white sort of hard-boiled noir stuff that we saw emerge in California in that time. So that's kind of what we've been into lately.
Also, I've been really into pottery, Instagram, and TikTok.
Yeah, and you're taking a pottery class.
I'm taking a pottery class.
Like watching or making pottery?
Well, I'm taking a class at the Art Center, pottery, wheel throwing class that I've never done before. And I love it because it's just, I'm completely out of my element. It's really hard. And I love like learning a new thing, but I discovered on Instagram and TikTok, these people make these amazing time-lapse videos to show what they're throwing. And it's like a corner of the internet I didn't know about. It's very exciting.
Awesome. Well, looks like we only have a few minutes left before Q&A. Maybe I'll close out with this one question. I'm sure a lot of people are curious. You guys are based in Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you guys been living in Indianapolis?
Since 2007.
Yeah, long time now. So like 14 years. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are curious, like why Indiana? Why live here in the Hoosier State?
I mean, initially we moved here because of Sarah's job at the IMA, and we were living in New York, and that was unsustainable on a lot of levels. Just felt way too intense for me and overwhelming, super expensive, and so we wanted to move somewhere else. And this opportunity came up at the IMA, and we thought that sounded great. And so we moved here, and we thought that it would probably be a brief foray, I guess. We thought
we'd be here for a few years, and then I'd find another job at another museum and we'd move somewhere else.
Yeah, and my expectation was always that I was going to be the trailing spouse, that wherever Sarah's career took her, it would be fine with me because all basements are the same. And
you required air conditioning and
a basement,
Wi-Fi.
and Wi-Fi, and my feeling at the time was that it didn't matter much to me, but in fact, it turns out it matters a lot to me, and a lot to both of us. That's just something that we had to discover over time as we became more deeply connected to the place.
Right.
And there was certainly, there was a moment where we could have moved, obviously, and
there have been a few.
Yeah, and we know that we could have moved, but. We really there's a lot that we love about Indianapolis. I mean, one thing I love about the art scene here is that I feel like it's growing. I feel like it's exciting. And I also feel like it's not that stuffy the way that parts of the art scene in New York and even Chicago were.
Right.
And then the other big advantage for me is that here, I know a lot of people who are not that interested in what I do for a job. Like most of my friends are normal people who have normal jobs. And that's really good for me. When I lived in New York, I was surrounded by writers. I, knew all of the publishing gossip. I felt deeply involved in that world.
And it wasn't very good for your writing.
No. It's much better for me to write. The example of this I always give is that when we moved here, we lived right near the corner of 86th and Ditch. And I could walk to that corner, and it was so horrifying to me with its flat roofed soullessness and its mini malls. And I just hated it. And I was so negative about it all the time until eventually one day I was at lunch at Smee's with my friend Chris, my best friend. And he said, this is one of the most racially and economically diverse zip codes in the United States. And I said, no, New York is. And he was like, you can look it up, man. And I realized that this was a place where great, big, huge moments in real human lives were taking place. And I was judging it based on some pretentious aesthetic, not based on the actual quality of the actual human lives. Mm-hmm. And that was a big moment of change for me. And ever since then, I haven't really wanted to live anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, it went from, in the early days, I would come home from my job and John would be like, please, let's go. And then as time went on, John started to say, we're never leaving. We can't leave. Don't look at that job. Don't take that job kind of thing. But really, I like being here for a lot of the same reasons. I think John and I have a lot of space to think, to process, to not get bogged down in any scenes. And I mean, until the pandemic, we felt like we could easily leave and come back and sort of get, I love being in a big city for a few days and just like back to back, seeing a lot of art shows, doing as much as I can. But I also really enjoyed leaving and coming back and being able to process that. Hopefully that will resume at some point pretty soon. We're starting to open up a little bit more, but we have really good friends here, really good relationships. I feel like Indianapolis is a place where if you want to do something and you have a good idea and you can pitch it and you are passionate about it, that people will listen and they're open to it. And people here want Indianapolis to be a better place. They're not pretentious. They want to hear good ideas. And I feel like people here want people to succeed. It's not like a dog eat dog city. It's like, oh, that's cool. How can I help you do that?
Yeah. That said, I think we should also acknowledge that Indianapolis has a long way to go.
Yeah.
I've just in the 15 years that we've been here, we've seen huge change in the art scene and in, the ability of young artists to be able to stay here and do the work that they love. But we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And we need to be retaining way more of the talented, young creative professionals who get trained in this city, who work with you.
But I see you're wearing a gang shirt.
That's right. I'm rapping.
And I don't know how many people watching went to the art fair Butter that was last month, but it was amazing. It was awesome. I went on Sunday afternoon and I thought, Sunday afternoon, it's going to be quiet and I'll just be able to slip in, see the art, leave. It was a massive party.
Yeah.
At 1:30 on a Sunday.
Awesome.
And it was full of people who weren't just there for the party. They were there and looking at art and buying art. And a lot of that art sold. So, I think that's a testament to the good work that Gang is doing, but also, it exhibits the kind of thirst that people here in Indy have for these kinds of experiences. So I'm excited to see where it goes. I want more people to do it, to make art experiences. I know there are a lot of people doing things, and I think it's tough because the city is so spread out, that it's kind of tough to get a picture of it or to have a focus of it or to really sort of grasp what the art scene is here because it's so nebulous, but there are a lot of people doing cool things here. And I wish that there was a way to sort of make it more visible and to bring people into interconnection more.
Yeah, I think we're making progress, but I think we're still on the journey for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you guys for sure. I grew up in Manila in the Philippines, lived here on and off for 17 years. And like you, John, I didn't want to live here. I made every excuse to leave, and somehow I keep coming back here, and I'm glad I did. I love living here. Like you guys said, the art scene is definitely on the upward trajectory. We have a long way to go. Like you said, we're on the ground level, and that's what makes it exciting. We are on that ground level. Yeah,
it makes you feel like you can have it. You can be a part of it. Which is really cool. When I was in New York, I never thought to myself
I'm really a part of this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if I lived in any other city, I don't think I would feel this way, that I'm actually a part of this community.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, great. Well, why don't we move on to Q&A?
Great.
Pull up some questions from YouTube. Here's one question. How do you handle one person losing, quote unquote, inspiration or creative drive? Does the other help to increase one person's creative output, or is that still just a personal endeavor?
I don't think we start screaming at each other, like increase your creative output.
Get at it, John.
Yeah, I mean, everybody goes through periods where, or at least in my experience, like I go through periods where I just have less of a desire. And at that point, it's about discipline, not about desire.
That's what I was going to say, that like, it's for both of us, I think what we do is really more of like a practice. And I think a lot of artists would agree with that statement, that it's not necessarily about inspiration, that sometimes you have to start working to find your inspiration. And that like most of the time, neither of us wake up and think like, oh, I'm going to create something great today. No. It's just like, I'm gonna have my coffee and I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna
get the kids
and
to
I'm
school,
gonna
and
I'm gonna
like
start to do
answer
something.
The emails from the teachers, and then I'm gonna try to open a Word doc.
Yeah, and then like, but hopefully you like write your way into it or work your way into it.
But also, I don't think it's the end of the world to take a little time off. Like, I mean, most of us are working other jobs. Like, you know, Sarah does work at producing
a poetry
web series, and I work on educational video stuff. And you know, so there's times when I'm working on that stuff and just don't have the energy to write, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Totally, rest is underrated. So
yeah, for sure.
To me, like if I don't feel inspired, then I guess my body's telling me to just stop and do something else. And
there's plenty else to do. So
take a walk.
Yeah. Okay, we have a couple more questions. How did the pandemic impact your work? Have you seen
hugely?
Profoundly. That's a surprise.
I had a book that came out in April of 2020. You Are an Artist. Thank you, John. But I was supposed to go on like a big book tour and had all the dates planned. Couldn't do that. We did it virtually. And you know, I had a lot of video shoots planned for the art assignment that we had to cancel, and had to quickly sort of pivot and figure out a way to make different kinds of videos and shoot them myself on my phone, and you know, have brutal. John do the camera for me and stuff like that. So like there were very immediate impacts. John? I
mean, there were also just immediate impacts practically because our kids needed a lot of support from e-learning. And I mean, we were very fortunate to be insulated from most of the worst impacts of the pandemic, to be able to stay home, but it was really, really challenging for our kids, and
I think a lot of people could relate.
And some of those, some of those challenges are ongoing. So I think the big way it reshaped our work life was that, in a way, it brought us into closer collaboration that we're still kind of like figuring out, because we were both home more, we were kind of in the same space more, so we were talking about work differently. Sarah's work changed a lot during the pandemic. She began making more visual art. My work changed as well because I became focused on, writing nonfiction, trying to write directly about my own experience. And so I think it really was a moment in our lives where everything's different. And we're still figuring out what that's going to mean because it's still happening.
Right. Yeah. We traveled a lot before.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is that
how many flights did you cancel?
I canceled 46 flights. So like, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to travel like that again. All this travel that felt inevitable and essential turned out to be completely optional, and I'm never going back. So that's a big change too.
Wow. Sarah, I think I was supposed to go to one of your events at the library.
Oh, it would have been great. It would have been great. Oh,
I'll just have to write another book.
Yeah, on the other side of this.
Okay, next question. I think there was a follow-up question, but I think you guys answered it. Here's a different one. Both of you do a great job celebrating and uplifting other creators, whether it's artists through the art assignment or VidCon. Can you speak about the work and how others can perhaps on a smaller scale also support artists, particularly in our state?
Yeah.
I mean, buy art if you can.
Yeah.
Buy local art if you can.
And if you can't, go see it and post about it and encourage other people to go. I think, there's a lot of work that can be done to make others' work more visible. And that's hugely important. I do think a lot of people in Indiana don't buy enough art. It's just not a priority. And there aren't a lot of commercial art galleries here.
There are opportunities to buy, like we try to buy quite a bit of local art.
Yeah, we do.
But I also think, a really important way that I think, Sarah, you're right, that like a really important way you lift up other creators is by posting about their work, by sharing it, talking about it. Just like when you're in conversations with people, be like, hey, you won't believe this crazy VHS style video that this guy Oreo Jones made, or something like you could just, and then get people interested in it by conversation. So much, like, we've kind of forgotten about word of mouth in the age of social media, but actually it's still a huge driver of how we connect with new work.
And I think if you're an artist, you shouldn't hesitate to reach out to people in the art community whose opinion you value. Invite them to your show, invite them for a studio visit. Maybe it's a little vulnerable making, but that's okay. Worst they can say is no. And then I think for people out who are not artists, and if you go see work you like somewhere, like, reach out to them, ask if you can do a studio visit, ask them about their work. I'm sure most artists would be absolutely thrilled to hear from someone who wanted to see more of their work and talk about it. And it's an email, so, or a direct message or what have you. So I think there are small ways that we can all sort of bolster each other in the art scene here.
Awesome. So buy art, talk about art, invite people to art shows or studios.
There you go.
Sounds cool. Great.
Doable. There we go.
Okay, next question. With all of your successes, both individually and together, how do you keep a focus on authenticity and remaining genuine to yourself in your art?
It's not hard. I mean, it's mostly just John and I together with our children barking orders at us. So
it's not that hard. I don't think we feel successful on a day-to-day basis. We mostly just feel overwhelmed, like most parents of young children do.
Right.
That's another
I think we do. I mean, we both keep each other on track.
I mean, you certainly keep me on track.
Yeah.
And, I'm not allowed to. We
don't tolerate much complaining in this house.
not around career stuff.
No.
Yeah, but I think I do think it's there are challenges to it. But for me, the whole pleasure of writing is precisely that I escape that I escape all that stuff, that I'm not thinking about publishing. I'm not thinking about the world of publishing. I'm not thinking about is this book going to sell in Italian or whatever? I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not thinking about whether the book's going to ever be a book. I'm thinking about the story. I'm inside that world. And there was a really difficult period for me creatively, from 2013 to 2016, when I wasn't able to do that. And when I tried to write, I did feel like there were people looking over my shoulder, and I did feel like there was pressure to finish something and publish something and follow up this successful book with another successful book. And it's a great problem to have. And obviously I'm grateful that I had it, but it was still quite challenging for me. And in the end, the way out of it was coming back to the place of, well, why do you do this? Why do you write? And I write because I want to understand myself, because I want to understand other people better. I want to get better at imagining the world around me with more complexity. And I write as a gift. And I think I had to go back to that writing and making art at its core is making a gift, is trying to make a gift for people.
I love that. Wow. There is, let's see, I want to respect your time. It's almost 3:00. But there is one question that I'm curious about, that if it's okay. This will be the last question. Sorry to those whose questions we've missed, but what is some of the best advice that you can offer to graduating students or creators this year?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry that you're.
Okay, thank you, John and Sarah.
Okay, no, I have some real advice. I have some real advice.
I'm glad you didn't graduate last year. I feel like this is a slightly better year in which to graduate, maybe, hopefully.
I would say to remember that there are many different ways to do this thing called art, or whatever it is you're doing. And that to not sort of have this firm understanding in your head of what it means to be an artist, or what it means to be a writer. Like, does it mean having an old desk and, a typewriter and, publishing so much from a big publisher, or for an artist, like to have the space or to have the shows? Like, I think the world has totally been turned upside down, and we don't know what the next thing is going to look like. But the successful artists and creators that I know, like, make stuff because they have to. Like, it's not really a choice. Like, if you like to make things, you're going to make them, and you're going to do the stuff you want to do. And that's its own driving force. But I do think you have to listen to that driving force, and to listen to what you actually want to do, rather than what you think you need to do to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. Like, when I graduated from college, I didn't know what young adult novels were.
YouTube didn't exist.
And YouTube didn't exist. Like, the word YouTube meant nothing to me because the platform wouldn't exist for another 6 years. And I didn't know that there was a genre for the kind of books that I was interested in. And I think that's the experience that you're in an exaggerated way, which is that you're in a moment where everything has been turned upside down, where the future feels wildly uncertain. And I know that that's scary, and I'm sorry that you have to enter into this new phase of your life in that time of great uncertainty. But I also think that there are going to be exciting things that come out of this, and there are more ways to create and make in the world
and share
in the world than ever, and also more than you can possibly have grasped. When I was graduating from college, I just remember thinking, I have to go become a minister because that's the only job where you get to write 800 words every Sunday. And it turns out you could have
been a journalist.
God, I'm not going to call strangers. But it turns out that there are lots of different ways of writing, lots of different ways of making art, lots of different ways of being an illustrator, being a designer, and all of these are ways of engaging your creative impulses. And so I would go into this moment with hope and enthusiasm, even though I know it's difficult.
And an open mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Sarah thought she was going to be a graphic designer. I thought I was going to be an Episcopal priest, and we turned out to have very different careers, but that we're very, very happy with. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. And
also, we don't really know what we're going to be doing in 5 years.
I don't know what I'm going to do when I grow up.
So I think the idea that you have to decide and then stick to it.
It's so much pressure too.
It's way too much pressure.
You're going to do one thing for the rest of your. No, you're not. You're going to do a ton of things.
And you think you want to do something, and then you do it, and you think, I don't really like to do that.
I don't actually like it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, enjoy the journey.
Even though it's very hard to do.
I found the first. I don't know about you, but I found the first few years out of college to be extremely difficult.
Yeah. Yes, and then other years.
Yeah, it's true. It's more of a
good luck.
Yeah, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Why are we telling you all this bad news? Everything's going to be great.
Yep. You'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
Yes. Well, I couldn't imagine a better way to end this. So, John and Sarah, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your stories. We really, really appreciate it. And I hope to run into you in Indy one of these days.
Yeah,
Definitely.
for sure.
Let's make it happen.
Jingo, thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much
It's been
for
so
having
great to
us.
talk to you.
Yeah, you got it. Now I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair. Anna, why don't you close us out?
Thank you, Jingo. And thank you, Sarah and John, so much for the great conversation this afternoon. And thank you, Jingo, for being an excellent MC. Although this is the final event of this Indiana Arts Homecoming, it isn't the last time you'll hear from us about this year's conference. Look for a brief survey in your inbox, what you loved a lot or just a little, and your feedback will help us tremendously in putting next year's conference together. Thanks in advance for returning the survey. And now I'd like to ask Commission Chair Alberta Barker to join to close us out this afternoon.
Thank you, Anna and Jingo. It's been a great conference and we're so appreciative of your hard work. There is an important milestone to mark this afternoon. Today marks Louis Rickey's last day as Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission. He has been a tireless champion for arts and culture in our state, and we are grateful for his service and dedication. I'd like to welcome First Lady Janet Holcomb to share a few words.
Louis, thank you for your purpose, drive, and vision for the arts in Indiana. I'm sure you didn't know when you took this job that you would become the longest serving executive director in the Indiana Arts Commission history. But we're so glad and so grateful that you did. Because every day along the way, you've shined a spotlight on art and artists across our Hoosier state. You've engaged artists individually and collectively at festivals, large and small, as well as iconic entities like the Children's Museum. And through partnerships with the Department of Natural Resources and the State Museum and Historic Sites, you've helped art and cultural activities come alive for so many Hoosiers. You've established the state's first public recognition program for communities, the Indiana Cultural District Program, among so many other impactful initiatives. So thank you, Louis, for your advocacy and action that has elevated art in Indiana. As you write your next chapter, we know your passion for the arts will continue to burn bright. On behalf of Eric and myself, and Hoosiers all across our great state, we're honored to present you one of Indiana's highest awards, the Sagamore of the Wabash.
Thank you, Janet, and thank the governor for extending this honor to me. I've had the pleasure of serving 3 governors, 9 chairs, 100 or so commissioners, thousands of artists, organizations, and communities, and 6.5 million fellow Hoosiers over the last 15 years. I've seen our state prosper economically, educationally, and creatively as the Commission renewed daily its commitment to bring the arts into the life of every citizen. My thanks go to the many people who helped this happen, especially the Commission's staff and volunteers. Serving as the Executive Director of the Indiana Arts Commission was a privilege and blessing of a lifetime. And as I go on in life, I will look on this award as a very special honor and remembrance. Thanks again to the governor and all of our state's leadership who gave me the opportunity to champion the arts, which I love, while serving my fellow citizens. Thank you again, Jen.
Congratulations, Louis. I've so enjoyed serving as a commissioner and now chair alongside you. Your leadership and commitment to the arts and to the Hoosier state has been second to none. Your work has helped position Indiana as a leader among state arts agencies across the nation, and your guidance has steered the agency through incredibly difficult times. On behalf of my fellow commissioners and staff, thank you for leading us these past 15 years and setting the agency up for continued success. Over the past year, my fellow commissioners, public stakeholders, and representatives from the office of Governor Eric Holcomb have been on the search for the next executive director of the Indiana Arts Commission. I'm pleased to let you know that beginning on Monday, Maya Michelson will begin as the next executive director of the Indiana Arts Commission. Maya's accomplishments speak for themselves. She served as the Indiana Arts Commission's deputy director for the last 6 years, overseeing the day-to-day operations of the agency, directing its budget, contracts, and grants for arts providers and artists in all of Indiana's 92 counties. Prior to joining the Indiana Arts Commission, Maya served as the first assistant economic development director for the arts in Bloomington, Indiana. And her experience isn't limited to the public sector. Maya has had executive leadership experience in local arts agencies, community arts centers, festivals, and museums. Now that you know a little more about Maya's background, I'd like to invite her to say a few words. Maya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alberta, for that kind introduction. I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to Louis for his leadership to the commission. Louis, you've created a legacy for the arts in our state that I'm proud to follow. I'd like to say thank you to the search committee and members of the commission for your guidance of the agency through this process and for your trust in me as the next leader of the Indiana Arts Commission. I'm so honored to serve the Hoosier state in this role.
Thank you, Maya. And thank you to all of you for tuning into the 5th annual Indiana Arts Homecoming Conference. I hope your weekend is full of art